Vashpins are back with another video. On the last video I told you guys I was going to make my ammo can PC, and if you don't know, remember what that looks like, here's my Harbor Freight ammo can. And so what I plan to do, my motherboard is roughly this size, you know, minus these little square things. So I'm going to take a little piece of plexiglass here that I do have spare. You can use MDF, you can use pretty much anything to mount your motherboard on, as long as it's anti-static and you're going to raise it up usually off of it to some extent. So I've got little brass risers I'm going to use for this, just like every PC motherboard has. And I'm going to cut my little square off of there using my little desk contraption. And so that'll be the motherboard that actually fits into here. And then I'm going to build or cut this down here to be at the top on it. And I'm going to have other pieces of random plexiglass to hold up the top to make sure it doesn't sink or anything, because I'm actually going to have the top be part of a motherboard tray. I'm also going to have the hard drive mounted. I'm going to have the power supply mounted to the top as well, so it has to be, you know, fairly rigid and sturdy. And so today I'm going to just get everything cut down into pieces. On the last video I showed you guys, I started to build all the little plexiglass extra pieces I needed to mount my motherboard and all that inside of my wonderful ammo can. And what actually happened was the video ran out mid-cut, so this is what's happening now. I did actually finish all the little pieces I need. Here's my motherboard support, right here. Here's going to be my hard drive support. And the slide end just one next to each other. Very flush. And then I created two more that are just supports. Stay. And these just go on either side on the back side, catastrophic, to support what will be at the top. Top, I'm hoping actually at this point, I was going to make an actual bracket and everything, but this I'm actually just going to make a flat plate so I can just set it on top and you plug through everything, so I'm not going to bother using the actual I/O plate that comes with it. I'm just going to use this. I think that's why people use power tools. Alright, I've got all the pieces that I needed cut out of all my plexiglass. I had to do a whole bunch of random inventing to actually, well, not inventing, just fabricating in order to actually get this all to work. So up front is my motherboard, or not motherboard, hard drive tray, which I've already got the actual hard drive mounted on it. So that has got a simple board that I can just remove this at any time, so it's not permanently mounted. I have a little mechanism I'll show you guys that it slides into. And on the other side I put down metal tape just to make it anti-static, because plexiglass on occasion can get kind of staticky. And that was pretty easy to make. The only problem was trying to get the screws countersunk in the back to where it's not grinding against the metal. Now comes kind of the weird stuff. So what I made in order to actually get the top of the hard drive to sit inside of this case here, because it's going to be against this wall, is I took a couple pieces of plexi, just made a little bridge. This is going to be glued on the inside of here, and the hard drive will actually just slide into place. And on top, I'm just going to have a little simple lever. This will be glued on one side, this will be glued on the other. And this is just a little pivoting arm that keeps the hard drive from wobbling left to right and front and back, because these are actually spaced out evenly enough inside of here to keep the hard drive going from left to right. And for the motherboard, I have the same type of mechanism, except it's going to be on the actual, well, it's going to be glued like this, to where the motherboard will actually lock into place. I have a little of this actually tapered to make sure that happens, make sure it's at least easy. And on the other side, I have a very rudimentary slide lock, which was kind of hard to make. It's just two pieces of plexi. This one is as thick as the actual motherboard tray that I have it mounted on. And this one's a little bit thinner just to make sure it has some clearance between this and the actual motherboard. And I put a little aluminum lever on here to actually be able to slide it back and forth. It was kind of hard to do. And just took two, I think they're drywall screws or weather wood screws. Cut them down to where they're just flush with everything. And when the hard drive is locked into place, this can just slide, and that'll lock it into place. Once again, these will be the same width to keep it from going left to right or sideways, and this will keep it locked in from going up and down because of these two here, and the actual other side is the same measurement, so it keeps the motherboard nice locked in place. Not to mention, with the very hard part was making the top, which I've already actually got in here. I don't have it permanently mounted or anything, but here is the actual beauty plate and top. And so let me take this all out. There we go. So on the back of this, I have a pretty beefy server fan. I think it's a 80 millimeter, something like that, but it's beefy. I, let's see here, found the wire for that fits, and a pretty decent power supply. I think it's like 350 watt or something like that. Just came out of an old Dell. And surprisingly hard was just doing a really ghetto extension of a power button. It's kind of hard to find power buttons just kind of lying around that work for PCs. So got that all set up for the top, and of course I got my VVV logo that I'm kind of experimenting with on top, along with not the prettiest port setup, but I don't have to worry about that silver beauty plate. I can just plug directly through this. And make sure I am grounded on something. There we go. Tons of electric stuff. Same thing like the motherboard or the hard drive. I mounted the motherboard on another piece of plexi with more metal tape. I think it's just ducting tape. And yeah, this is as simple as it gets. This will just slide in here. Just slide in and then lock into place, and then the other thing will slide onto it and that'll be locked in. So now, instead of trying to like shove my camera in and do it later, I'm going to glue all these in here and make it a actual finished product and put all the supports in to where the motherboard and everything is locked in tight, and you can put it on its side if you want to. That's kind of the plan. So the finished product and the reveal of the finished product will be on the next video. On the last video I showed you guys I was going to build a computer into this. I'm happy to say that it took me a little bit, but I'm finally done. I ran into a whole bunch of snags I had to fabricate, a lot of random things. As you'll see in a lot of my build videos, or my build video in this specific one. But I'm happy to say that got a computer in here. Yay! So I'll give you guys close-up pictures and such in a close-up video here in just a sec. But as I told you before, this comes off, it's weatherproof. And actually, let's see if I can just do it. Only problem is on sideways it doesn't hold in too well. But there we go. There's my computer. I got double V in here. I used just a step bit to make on my drill press. Pretty cool pattern for the intake there. Ports are pretty easy to get to. Power button I had to kind of make. And everything else lines up pretty alright. Not the best work ever, but I'm pretty happy with what I was able to do. And with the minimal tools that I was able to do it with. Alright, since I didn't really do a build video per se, I figured I would show you just a quick overview of the tools that I had to use in order to more or less get my computer to that state, and kind of what I ran into trying to do that. So I started off with just simple extra plexiglass. I'm sure you pretty much you can find this at any big box store, you know, Home Depot, Lowe's, that type of thing. I think even Walmart kind of has this stuff. This is just typical black stuff. I had clear stuff that I just happened to find from an old like feeder case from an old like buy outdoor stuff store. Anyways, got a hold of that, and this was actually my first attempt, but as you can see right here, I was way off on my ports. I completely had to replace where the motherboard actually was in the case. So this pretty much got thrown out, but that's okay. This one was a lot messier, more or less a good prototype, but had, you know, good patterning and such. I figure for a future note, if I do this again, or if anybody wants to do this, do that piece the very last. I kind of did it in the middle. Don't. It's just silly. Let's see here. Good friend, of course, Dremel tool. I have both a corded and uncorded Dremel tool because the battery will run out on this pretty quick. For general shaping, I used the sander quite a bit. Even just towards the end, it became the least smelly and the easiest to take off huge chunks of this, unless I had to cut through, you know, a couple inches. And I started off with just a simple hacksaw to try to get through that, but it started getting pretty hot and pretty smelly, so I stopped using this about halfway through, because all I didn't have a typical hack or a typical saw. I had a I think this is like a pruning saw or something like that, but I used the finer tip, and I was able to cut through a lot of material with very little smell, with very little effort. And I didn't even have to use oil on this in order to get it to go through, but I'm sure it would have worked better if I did. I did try to use the chunky side. If you notice on the case, there is a whole bunch of cracking on the edge. That is definitely from using this. So don't go that crazy or aggressive, but this worked out great. I'll use this for plexiglass pretty much from this on out. Maybe you know, your actual, I think whatever the lumber saws are. That works pretty well. Besides that, my favorite thing that I used was this Harbor Freight needle file set. This thing cut through the plexi pretty well. I was just able to shape everything really square on the newest one. I was really happy with this. Otherwise, I had a giant, I found this at a flea market. I don't know what these are called. It's like a version of a rasp, but takes off great amounts of material no matter if using plexi or wood. It worked stupendous. Other than that, typical files. These actually worked okay for squaring everything off, especially this one, but they didn't seem to be as aggressive as the needle files. So I usually went with those. Glued everything in, once again, with more Harbor Freight stuff. This is just 60-second epoxy. So far has worked really, really well. One thing you definitely need is your square. And let's see, the only other thing for shaping, I used a few of these bits. Once again, the stuff I used for masonry. These worked really well in plexi, although they did tend to goop up quite a bit because of heat, and I needed to actually clean them before they dried, or else it became a huge ordeal. But other than that, the only thing that was kind of cool that I actually had to invent is I couldn't find a good way to keep the plexi still while I sawed into it, so I invented this thing here. Super simple. I'm sure people have had wedge vices before, but it's just held down to my table using this vise on that side. If I ever needed to get a piece of plexi in there, I just split it apart. I need to keep it apart permanently. Just put it down there. Find the spot that you want. Take that out. And then you just take another clamp on this side. Just clamp it all down. And it worked like a charm. Nothing moved. Let's see here. I think that's pretty much it. I got isopropyl alcohol for cleaning off all my ink for the permanent marker. Permanent marker cleans really well with especially 91% isopropyl. But yeah, that computer right there is a 4-core AMD with 4 gigs of RAM, 2 terabyte hard drive. I'm pretty much going to go plug it right in. I've already made sure it turns on and boots all the way up. So I'm going to go use it, and hopefully it works for years on end like my last PC. And I'm pretty sure I got everything edited correctly, so either this will be 2 videos or just one long how did I do this video. Because with this beast, I'll actually be able to edit videos again without having to like pull my hair out. So until next time, this has been Vash Venture.